Mike's on.
Good afternoon. We're returning to the BZ calendar, continuing hearing item. Item number 17, 7811 BC on 3712A, 7870 Chesterfield Hall, Queens.
Good afternoon. Jordan Most from the Office of Sheldon LaBelle on behalf of the applicant.
Were you at our review
We
session?
were, and we don't even have to be there now, right? We can watch it.
It's all virtual.
It's virtual.
I think that on the whole, we were relatively satisfied with your latest submission. I think we just had a couple of open items, and perhaps you could address those. There was fire department access, which I believe you've spoken to the fire department about.
So the fire department's here. I don't know if and I can speak to it. Maybe the fire department should speak to it. I'm happy to.
And then we also had an issue about the entry gate at 84th.
Happy to explain that as well.
If-
I have a diagram that maybe will try and help explain it.
Great, so let's cover those issues.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Anthony Scaduto for the Fire Department. We reviewed the last submission. Unfortunately, we're late in terms of issuing a letter, but the Fire Department is prepared to accept all the conditions that were proposed. We will be issuing a letter of approval. There are certain things that we are asking be put into the plans. There'll be no standing in any of the 20-foot wide access areas. The turnaround that Commissioner Hinkson had asked, the turnaround that has been submitted is acceptable to us. All buildings, just by their very nature, are sprinkled, but we want to confirm that all buildings are being sprinkled. And the last thing is that we want to confirm that a fire hydrant exists within 100 feet of every Siamese connection. Now, we also had discussed, you had mentioned to me that the rear of the building, there is no hydrant. We're aware of that, but the approach we're taking on this complex is the same approach we took when it was Creedmoor. We'll be feeding the Siamese connections, the interior of the buildings, the standpipes will be supplied water from those Siamese connections. If there's a rear attack, we won't be bringing hoses from the rear of that building anyway, so there is no need for that, for additional hydrants to be added.
So we could condition our resolution.
Yes,
on
and
these items being.
on these items, and we will be submitting it, of course, that letter to you. It just hasn't been properly prepared. It has to be signed off by the Chief of Operations. But basically, we accept the conditions that were described to us with these limitations, and that's it. We're ready to, as far as our area of concerns, we're ready to sign off this project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Most?
Many of those conditions are actually already on our GCL site plan. I know there is a notation that there's certainly no parking, and maybe we can modify it so that there's no standing as well in those roadways, which I think have actually now been widened to 23 feet, 24 feet. And there's a note also that all the buildings will be sprinklered, and I confirmed this morning with the architect that, and we'll add a note that the hydrants, that a hydrant will be no farther than 100 feet from any Siamese connections on the buildings. With respect to the gate, I know in our last submission we submitted some photographs of the dead end there at 82nd Avenue, and you can see the gate plainly there at the end of the roadway that is generally a closed gate for the Feinstein Center. And to the extent it's necessary, what we would do is we would push back. We would obviously need to talk to the Feinstein Center and make this change, but we would push this gate back so that it would be able to accommodate the roadway that needs to come in here. So the roadway, our roadway, the site roadway isn't a gated or closed roadway. So the gate for the Feinstein Center, so as to not disturb their closure and privacy, would be pushed back, and their fencing would be pushed back just enough to accommodate the fire department required access way.
I'm sorry, could you take a look at the plan and just call out for us exactly?
Where this is?
Yeah, because.
So this isn't on the variance. You have to look at the GCL plan in order to see this.
No, but on this.
In accordance to the graphics, could
what's the
you
gate?
just tell us what we're looking at? Yeah.
So that's it's the GCL site plan.
We get that, but I'm not sure what the blue bars are and the,
Nothing's labeled.
yeah, you don't have any labels. I'm assuming that's what you mean by the gate, but
Yeah, well,
I could
it's
be
labeled
wrong.
on the GCL plan. So there's it says, the green, it's that green area, it's this GCL sheet 100.
Okay,
And the red is identified as the easement area that's conveyed in the deed from DASNY.
right,
And then the green is this access roadway, and those are the turning radius for, as the fire department had requested regarding fire trucks, providing access into the yellow roadway on the site.
right.
And where's the fence?
So the fence is not on, so the thing I just gave you is where I've added that fence. That's this heavy blue line. The heavy blue line is where the fence is and where the fence would be moving back to in order to accommodate, to the extent it needs to accommodate this green roadway. So it looks like you wouldn't even have to move it, at least according to this graphic. But when you look at the photographs, it looks like that fence takes up more than 50% of the street, which would mean there needs to be some movement. Maybe this green is not shown as wide as it actually is, but there's clearly the reality of the situation is it would need to be moved. So it would be moved just enough to accommodate a turning roadway from 82nd.
Commissioner Montanez, this
Yes.
is your issue.
I know you mentioned that, and the reason why I raised the question was because I felt that moving the gate westward would impede upon the Feinston roadway.
So Feinston has a roadway there.
And it would, you might be impinging on their roadway.
Whatever has to be done would be done on behalf of Feinston. They have some interior sidewalks and there's some landscaping that's on the other side of on the inside of their ring roadway, if you will. And there may need to be some manipulation of those spaces in that area in order to accommodate this pushback.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't going to impact their fire department access.
Right. I mean, it won't be able to.
Right.
Can't impair anything on that side either. But I think that's a fairly wide roadway, and it's a very under-traveled roadway. There's not a lot of vehicles moving through that area.
Well, you could give us a little bit of information about that, right?
Okay. Yes.
And I know
could-
you're going to have to negotiate with them, so.
Yeah, there's gonna have to be a dialogue as to how this gets addressed. And again, we only want to move it the least amount. We want to create the least amount of disruption as is required to create the access point.
Anything else from us? We're open it up.
Okay. Is there anything else that you wanted to discuss with respect to this?
I know there were two letters that were submitted. I just want to briefly state with regard to very briefly, Belrose Civic Association submitted a letter. I just wanted to be clear that the roof height of the building is at 43 feet, and that there are several bulkheads that are permitted on the roof without impacting the building's height. But that the building height is 43.5, roof height is 43.5 feet, and that we've also set back the rooftop space, recreation area, and fencing is set back from all the building's perimeter walls. And that further mitigating, and I think I've said this, and we made a submission, at least 2 submissions ago, that included some materials regarding the sloping land, which is more toward the north, but does to some degree mitigate any height impacts from this building, which is a significantly reduced building from where we started. And we've also given you materials regarding the proposed landscaping. Just to distinguish a few things, the Father Reader apartments are very different from this site, which is a C8 site. That was an as-of-right residential site. that wasn't burdened with a number of the problems that this site has: unusual shape, use history on the site, complex and distant infrastructure issues. The Father Reader site didn't have any of those problems. It's a rectangular site, residentially zoned, and or largely residential, rectangular, and that, and then with respect to, I think Rocky Hill Civic had mentioned or pushed for this townhouse concept, which really is impractical for this site in that it doesn't create enough density on the site. It's difficult from a layout perspective. It also doesn't accommodate a community center. That's an important central element of this development, and that the concept of elevators in a townhome are impractical. Vertical design with stairs is not practical also for seniors. In fact, there was an article in the New York Times about that, I think a couple of weeks ago, about stairs and problems in stairs in senior housing as a hazard. That is really it. Perimeter trees I mentioned. The roadway we widened from 20 to 23 feet along the perimeter. The fire department's weighed in on that. And that's it. Happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, are there any other comments?
So before we go to public testimony, I just want to preface that this is the 5th hearing on this item. So in the interest of time and the fact that we have actually heard very much from many of you who are here, we would like to confine any remarks made today to the submission that was made by the applicant on October 28th. And again, in the interest of time, aside, in addition to that restriction on the subject of the submission, we're going to restrict the time for each piece of testimony to 1.5 minutes. So you're going to have to reduce, just distill your comments into the really critical points, okay? So for this first speaker on this item.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm going to be very quick. My only additional comments after...
You need to state your name for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right.
Sorry about that.
State Senator Tony Avella in opposition to the application. My only additional comments after submitting more than 4 separate statements since September 2013 is that the Board of Standards and Appeals must consider all the evidence that has been presented over the past 15 months in its determination of whether to grant the applicant the requested relief. This includes all of the evidence as set forth in the New York State Inspector General's report, September 2013, illustrating the highly questionable and unethical conduct of the applicant. It is my fundamental belief that if BSA grants this variance, it will set a very dangerous precedent for years to come about the lack of ethical standards to which applicants are held in the important public proceedings. And I would just make one formal comment. Having dealt with a lot of BSA applications over the years, and as the former chairman of the Zoning and Franchises Committee of the City Council, I have never seen such lies and misrepresentations in any application I have ever dealt with. I think it would be a travesty of justice if this applicant is allowed to do anything other than the one-story community center, which was the intended purpose of them getting this land in the first place.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Mitch Ross. I'm counsel to the Civic Associations in opposition. I'll also be very brief, and I'll address the last submission and an issue just discussed very briefly by Mr. Most. I think the board is at the point now where it's parsing out the finding, and I think the minimum variance finding. And as the Rocky Hill Association requested the board to consider a smaller development of some kind, townhouse-like, or less density, less units. And the owner and the applicant are saying that that sort of arrangement doesn't facilitate the desired senior housing. But since this isn't a programmatic needs case, I'm wondering why we are, not that we're deferring to it, but why are we even considering that? And why aren't we looking at this as a straight residential development? And I think that the record, it would be good if the record reflected that the applicant looked at whether a straight market rate residential development could be a smaller size, and in our opinion, more appropriate to the character of the area, and still make a reasonable return. For example, the proposed senior housing has common areas which, in a smaller market rate development, wouldn't be necessary and could be used for units.
I'm sorry, you have to wrap up really quickly.
Okay.
You've exceeded.
So I'd ask the board to have the applicant look at that issue. The cost analysis done in the financials is for a building that's designed for seniors, which may not be the most cost-effective, and the issue here is to alleviate the hardship which exists on the site.
Okay,
And
thank
so-
you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and fellow commissioners. My name is Jerry Wynn, President of the Belrose Hillside Civic Association. Mr. Most referred to my letter specifically about the height of the building. If you refer to his plans, which I have right here, the bulkhead is indeed 53 feet, not 43 feet, as he stated. Just wanted to make that clear. Also on the GCL 100, page 1, it shows that the west, north, and south sides of Building A are surrounded by a roadway marked non-FDNY. Does this mean that if there's a fire, the fire department will not have access? Also on aerial photo number 1, the applicant has circled in red the 82nd Street dead-end street abutting their southern parcel of property. While 82nd Avenue is a wide street, I draw your attention to the perpendicular street, which is very narrow. So if they're going to use this as a regular ingress-egress, we vehemently oppose that. Also, he had made a statement about the Bernard Feinstein Center. I had spoken to them, and they said there was no way they were going to give up any of their property. So I don't know what kind of negotiations they're doing. Well, okay, fine. Also, their evergreens that they show. By my calculations, in order to screen a 53-foot high building, it will take between 15 and 20 years. That's ludicrous.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Why are the homeowners being asked to sacrifice the value of their
Excuse me.
homes?
State your name for the
Oh,
record, please.
Thomas Diana? Why are the homeowners being asked to sacrifice the value of their homes and the quiet of their neighborhood for the investors in a commercial catering hall? Don't confuse an IRS filing with the investors making money on the catering hall. The deceptions regarding the terrace over Belrose and the medical complex continues. They continue to play the game to keep 6 different truths floating. There is an old saying, ask me no questions, I'll tell you no lies. Let's look at the plans, as I do, as a professional engineer and event organizer. Starting from the basement, there are 5 rooms in the basement totaling 8,000 square feet with 10-foot clear height ceilings, okay? All marked as utility. Nothing marked as storage, no boiler room, no service bathroom, okay? Who needs such a massive basement, and why the cost? This is just a vague description to hide the rental and catering potential. There are 6 separate doctor's offices and reception area, not marked as such. 8,000 square feet of community facility and not even a hand sink is shown. Again, no bathrooms are shown. Who drew up these plans? And I'm glad they're not part of my city project. The rooftop catering terrace has not a single bathroom shown for 5,300 square feet of enclosed space and 11,000 feet of outdoor space. No doors are shown on the roof area, no designations, no water fountains are shown, no hand sinks. The roof structure is not even shown on the elevation. They kind of left that off. That's not an oversight. Even the height comparisons are manipulated. The 50-foot salt dome is apparently 5 feet taller than the 55-foot building. The mystery 15-foot depression is measured from the top of the Union Street Bridge over the parkway, not the grade.
Okay, please
Okay.
wrap up.
This is not a sleepy retirement village. This is a massive catering event complex for weddings and festivals. And this is what I do for a living.
Thank you, appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Caroline Verline. I lived on by 82nd Avenue. I live inside the block. And the exit place and entrance place that he's talking about on 82nd Avenue, it used to have a fence there. It's Creedmoor's property. It belongs to the state. And when Bernard Feinstein built one-story housing for their patients, they put a fence there. And the fence is only for emergency only. And in that place, being it's so big, and being we live up the block from the Cross Island Parkway, that has always been a playground for the children. So if they do anything, that's taking a playground away from the children. But not only that, on our block is narrow. And when you come down the block, you have to squeeze or you have to go, and you're gonna have all these cars coming down our block with the Cross Island Parkway. Is gonna be horrendous. Now, they're building this right behind our homes. Okay, right there, right behind our homes. Now just think about, you wanna have company, you go out in your backyard, you're going on your sun deck, and you're gonna have a party. And all of a sudden, what are you gonna see? A 4-story wall all the way up. That's what you're gonna see. You come down, you go into a nice place to live, get away from the city, get away from buildings. Now here you are, sitting in your backyard, looking at a building and nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is
Okay, sorry.
My name is John Walkie. I have been to this place a few times before, presenting the arguments for the ICCC. Every trip was worth because the intention of this project is worth to support. It is all about a 4-story residential building for the old folks, along with the cultural center in the mostly abandoned and neglected landmass, which is part of the Creedmoor Hospital Center. I have included the area, the layout of the surroundings in my report. This land is locked in by all 4 sides with major roads, and Cross Island Parkway being on the east. There are taller buildings abandoned all around. The structures all around scattered about this place. These buildings include a 10-story garage, a large 6-story active salt dome, and a 10-story power plant with 2 white smokestacks that are about 18 stories tall. And the property is almost 10 feet below street level. And it is at the center of the vastly developed area. There are...
Sorry, your time is up, so one last sentence, fast, to be fair. Thank you, okay.
One more thing. We are so grateful to this land for the opportunity we had to work hard and move up. This is a dream center for us. We will keep on knocking until the favor fall and justice prevail. Thank you.
Thank you, thanks. Next speaker, please.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Bishop John Seedy. I'm here in my own stead as a bishop of the Episcopal Church. And I've also served in other capacities ecumenically as Vice President of National Council of Churches. I'm here in support of this endeavor. I know I have very limited time, but I'm also familiar with the neighborhood. I used to live in that area. My parents continue to live in that area. I know many people that live in that area. At least from my particular church, we've always been engaged in these kinds of projects that support schools and hospitals and facilities that support seniors. I think from what I've heard and understood this project, this has gone through many iterations. It has been complex, but I think the intent is a noble one and not ignoble in any sense, as perhaps been somehow misunderstood or perhaps for various reasons mischaracterized. I know many of the people that have been engaged. They have been honorable people and straightforward. No project is perfect, but I think this project affords an opportunity to respond to a very specific and practical human need. And most particularly, the human need is responding to an aging community. And this project,
Sorry.
I understand, is also one that takes place in other parts of the city of New York. Thank you and happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
You too.
Commissioners, honorable commissioners. My name is Joseph Cheruvelil. I am a retired professor from St. John's University, where I taught for 39 years. I have been a resident of Queens for 48 years. I have seen the community grow, the Indian community. One of the courses I taught was the pursuit of the American dream, how people with nothing can come to this blessed country, be part of it, be proud of the community, and do their best to nourish this country. When I started living in Queens, there were hardly 100 people or so in Queens. Now in that central Queens area, we have thousands and thousands of people of Indian origin. We are doing quite well. We are a law-abiding, low-profile people. But our population is aging, and they are thinking about where shall we spend the last years of our life. We need a community center very badly to get together, to say hello, for support. I don't know the technical side of it, but as a resident of Queens, the most multicultural county in the whole United States, I humbly beg of you to grant us this request for us and our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Please try to confine your remarks to submission-related issues.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and fellow commissioners. My name is Leela Merritt. I am the recording secretary of the Local 375 and DC 37 and a community activist. I support the project and please support the GCL application, and I am a member of the community and I want my voice to count. For the GCL, please note that Winchester Boulevard and Hillside Avenue are very wide and large streets. These streets in the old days were used for military drill practice. Creedmoor used to have 7,000 patients and was able to handle a large number of people, and now the population of Creedmoor only in hundreds, as per the Queen's Civic Report. By giving the GCL to seniors, no traffic confusion will take place. 82nd Avenue is 80 feet wide and it can further minimize traffic problem. I want to repeat that 82nd Avenue is at least 80 feet wide. Many CDS will use 24-hour Union Turnpike or Hillside Avenue where there is public transportation. Still, we need the option for 82nd Avenue to provide full access. Also, there is a talk that we do not have the expertise or do not have financing. We have lived here for over 40 years. We have professionals in every field from this area. We have the expertise and financing. We are engineers, bankers, architects, and professionals. If we start a project, then we will finish. We are the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Sorry. Thank you, sir.
Go ahead.
Respected Chair and all the members of the tribunal. My name is Dr. Joy T. Kunjapu. I am a retired professor who worked for Columbia, Yeshiva, and City University of New York. Right now I live in this area, and I am not really involved with this project. You can consider my opinion is something objective, not subjective at all. First of all, in this particular file that I circulated to you just now, there is a report that has appeared in Daily News, and you know, it talks about the importance of Queensborough and how it has supported all our seniors for such a long time. Belrose, as you know, it is a place filled with seniors, I should say, rich with seniors. Only next to Flushing, which has maximum number of seniors, this particular area is very close to, or rather adjoining the area that we are talking about. Now, I say, my support is mainly because this community, this particular microscopic minority of Indian community which has come from India, they are all very disciplined, educated people, and they will not be a threat to anybody in the community. I tell you very emphatically because, you know, these people have been contributing to our economic prosperity. And also, they have been helping you, you know, as health professionals, doctors, nurses, pharmacists,
Sir,
you name,
sir,
and
your
also
time
as
is up.
experts. Finally, I endorse this project
Thank you.
as strongly and intensely as I used to recommend hundreds of American students to medical school.
Okay. Thank you very much. Please, when the beeper goes off, it's the end of the minute and a half.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and other commissioners. My name is Jaswin Samuel. I support ICC Senior Housing Project. I am a member of the community. I lived in Belrose and still living in the area. We need a senior housing. We need a senior center. Senator Avella is no longer the senator of the Creedmoor, the area representing this the center. Present senator never opposed this project. He always supported it. The accusation and judgment by Senator Avella was proved wrong and not have any legal standing, and he wasted thousands of taxpayers' dollars money into 2 investigations against the group. He have a political hidden agenda against the group. This is like a political paying back, because some of the community not supported him. That's why he manufactured this protest. Through his opposition of this project, he is against the seniors and senior centers. One example of his experience in project is the waste of money and hurting kids when he was responsible for the College Point Sports Association. I have an article that talks about what happened in College Point, and the landfill was put in playgrounds.
Please wrap up.
Yeah, in '99, Avella has to resign as a president of the College Point Sports Association and the College Point complex, and had to shut down and clean up and turn to the New York City Parks Department. Since it has been dumped with 15,000 tons of illegal material into the playground.
Okay, sir, thanks. Can you submit that? You've written it down?
yes.
So why don't
She
you?
already submitted
Yes.
Yeah, you submitted that, so we
Yeah.
can read it then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any more?
Next speaker. No, go ahead, sir.
My name is Saratmi Pagala. I'm a resident of Belrose, right next to where this project is being built. I'm a person of Indian origin following the American dream. I moved into this neighborhood because different neighborhoods have characteristics. This neighborhood is typically single family houses with only height of 2 stories, 2-story buildings. All of a sudden I'm realizing right in my backyard, exactly right in my backyard, there's a 4-story building going on. I have nothing against the seniors, I support seniors, but this is changing the characteristic of the neighborhood where we invested in, people who are before me invested in. Because of that reason, I object this project.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Mike O'Keefe. I'm with the president of the Creedmoor Civic Association. I'm just going to make one point because others I have made before. In the submission, the area 6 is about area character, and there's an overhead photo, which is not new, but I haven't heard this point made before. There are numbers on various buildings that delineate how high the buildings are as compared to the community. And I just went this morning and took a look, and the number 4 that's the closest to the neighboring homes, to me appears to be a 3-story building, and I don't know legally whether that's true or not. It could be, and it has a peaked roof, so it could possibly be considered a 4-story building. But I just bring it up for consideration in terms of the number of functional levels, if you're going to use the old buildings as a context for what's a good size for a new building. There'd be 4, 5 functional levels on a new building compared to the 3 that I noticed this morning. And thank you very much for throughout this process for your letting us give our opinions.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Tony, what's up?
It's not resetting, that's why.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Panikar.
Please speak up
Just
into
speak up
the mic.
Can you pull the mic down a little bit, dear?
I'm here to support the project. There is a housing crisis. Seniors are most vulnerable. They have fixed incomes and need to be closer to their families. They need to be in near places that can help them and have enough resources. I have an article that discusses the city's housing crisis. The title of the article is How We Can Fix New York City Housing. We should find the commercial or industrial zone areas that allow for more housing. We should maximize these areas to have the maximum amount of units. This is what we are doing here. We have a commercial area that is surrounded by a salt dome, heating plant, and 2 smokestacks, garage, gas station, power plant, and transformer. We want to turn this into a senior housing. We need more senior housing. I came to this country and worked hard. I have provided for my family and served the community. I am a member of the community, and my voice should be heard.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. Rosemary Leisky. I am exactly across the street from this project. I have been dealing with all the construction in Belrose for the past couple of years, and it's getting to be ridiculous. Every street you go down, there is construction. We have rats. Rats. Yes, I had the city in on the rat thing because when they do constructions, they're not neat and clean. Now, the 82nd Street entrance is ridiculous. That is our playground for our children. I told you I would take you personally on a tour of 242nd Street. 242nd Street is a very narrow street. If you start putting in catering centers and doctor's offices and stuff like that over there, they're going to have to come down 242nd Street to get in there. Tractor trailers, my husband's bread truck will not fit down this street. That's how narrow our streets are. The children are in the street. We have to curve around cars to get, when we're driving down the street, and God forbid it snows, you cannot get down the street. I want to know, are we going to widen 242nd Street to accommodate them? Because there is no way traffic is going to get into this area. And then after 82nd Avenue, yes, that is wide enough for anything to go down, but after you go through those gates, it's very, very narrow, and it's a very narrow turn to go through. Now, on Senator Avella, my daughter did a report, which I'm going to give to you afterwards for college. Senator Avella was recently interviewed on his involvement with the ICCC conflict. He stated that the issue was brought to his attention while he was campaigning for the Senate seat in 2010, only because people were approaching him on how did they get their money back.
Okay,
Now,
if you could just submit that because
okay.
you have it
She
in
is also
writing.
vice president of the Belrose Civic.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please. Is there any other speakers? Yes? If there's anyone else who wants to speak, please come over to the ramp there so that you can be ready.
My name's Valerie Lang. Good afternoon. I live right off of 82nd Avenue. Yes, 82nd Avenue is a wide street, but 82nd Avenue is a dead-end street on both ends. The only way into this street are from Hillside Avenue and Union Turnpike, which is minimum a 2 city block length, and they are skinny streets. This facility would produce 200-plus cars coming in and out our skinny streets past our homes. If it's going to be senior care, it's going to be shifts. It's going to be nonstop traffic 24 hours a day. There are homes at all four corners of 82nd Avenue. The home closest to where they want to open is a 4-family home. They have no backyard. They use the front grass as their barbecue, as their public space. This is where they play. Having this many cars go back and forth past all our homes is just counterproductive. I'm in the neighborhood 62 years. I remember when it was nothing but dirt streets. There was no hospital. We have grown. We have built beautiful 2-story garden apartments. I love them. They're gorgeous. We have single-family homes, single-story homes that are being knocked down and being built into 2-story and sometimes 2.5-story brick things. They're changing the character of the neighborhood. We are in this neighborhood because we love the suburban look. We've built this community into a beautiful community. People want to come into this community. Keep it this way. Don't change it. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Abraham Verghese. I'm a resident of Belrose area. And good afternoon, Madam Chair and the members, respected members. I'm here to support the project. I fully support building senior housing and community center. Senior housing is different from other types of housing. I have attached a New York Times reports article that goes into the concern for the senior housing and focus on falls. Who are attached with the medical system and hospital, they know that the senior most serious problem for the seniors are the falls, and we are spending millions of dollars on treating them. One of the top injury for the seniors is falls. We need an elevator and also special markings around the building and inside the apartments. These measures have extra cost. We have it to protect our seniors. Another concern is for seniors is to be active and not just physically but mentally too. They should be part of the community and not only to not feel alone at their houses and residence. A community center is the best way to do this. Imagine a senior complex that is built by seniors and for seniors. Inside there would be a community center and for all of them to come together and have their time together. Finally, this group has asked for an absolute minimum. They went from 14 stories to 9 stories to 6 stories and now at 4 stories. This is the lower than the surrounding buildings, which is known to everybody here. We need to have more housing. This is not being done by outsiders. This is done by our own people, our own community. It is being financed by us. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much. Are there any other speakers on this item? Okay.
So, Mr. Most, how do you want to proceed?
So I've got a couple of items that maybe some clarification and some changes to my, I think, the GCL site plan pursuant to the fire department's requirements, and also some clarification certainly with regard to the fines incentive. We'll try and get some diagrams or something that indicates a proposed scenario that doesn't impact the fines in circulation or minimizes anything and doesn't run afoul of any fire department requirements there.
Could you also just clarify exactly the heights of the building? Make sure that your roof height is at 43 feet, as you've stated. Make sure that, I think what people are interpreting is that recreation center is actually roofed in some way, and it's not.
It is not. It is not.
Right,
And there
so-
are several, there is there is a bulkhead structure up there. There's a stair on the plan. You can see
Right.
there's a stair and an elevator that.
But I think if there's some way that on the plan, you can just, make sure that that's an open area, it's a roofed area, it's on the roof, it's not roofed, and that it's not in addition to your 43 feet.
The drawings show it as if it's a wall.
Yeah.
It's black as if it's a new wall.
Yeah, so it's confusing. And also maybe be a little more intentional in describing what the accessory uses are in the cellar,
Yes.
right? So you've got a lot of mechanical space down there, or your, whatever it is, but it should be accessory to.
If there's storage, if there's
A-
specifically mechanical space
Exactly.
and.
Exactly, and no catering. So you want to make sure that that's represented on the plan correctly. I think if you can provide us with that information, we're prepared to close the hearing. So can you tell me how much time you need?
I could do that well, we're closing the hearing, are we setting a decision date?
Yes, we will.
So if I could work backwards from there, I guess. I can endeavor to give you materials as quickly as possible.
Okay. Just one second. Yeah, okay. 2 weeks, okay. So submit on the 16th and then
Can you submit by December 16th?
Yes.
And those members of the public in opposition, could you submit by the 30th of December? And we will decide this on the 6th of January.
Sorry? The 13th, give them the time. Oh, I'm sorry.
We'll give you an additional.
Yeah, give them a week to respond.
You'll get to the 13th to
Thank you.
respond. And then we will decide this out on the 27th of January.
27th?
That's our next available hearing after the 13th.
It's hard to believe there's that much
No, we
more to
closed,
say.
you
I'm
know.
wondering if,
Oh, yeah.
is there any way we,
It's the next vote.
No, we close.
And then hearing a decision on the 13th.
Yeah, hearing a decision on the 13th.
Okay.
Because we're closing today.
We can close, we can grant
Yeah,
it on the
yeah.
13th. So
Yeah.
we're prepared to go to decision on the 13th.
13th, okay.
Close today and go to decision on the 13th with those submissions.
And you can respond on the 6th.
Thank you.
Can you make those dates?
Yes.
Perfect. Motion to close.
Thank you.
Chair Perlmutter.
Aye.
Vice Chair Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Item number 18, 18813BZ and 18913A, 20 Daya Court, Staten Island.
Hello, good afternoon again. Eric Palatnik on behalf of Adam Rothkrug. Mr. Rothkrug requested that to submit in early January.
Yes.
Plans are just about being completed now.
Okay, so if you could submit on January 6th for a hearing on the 27th, does that work?
That works great, thank you.
Okay.
Item number 19, 32813BZ, 8 Berry Street, Brooklyn.
Oy, Berry Street.
Berry Street.
Berry Street. Berry Street.
You
Little
heard-
gym.
I assume
couldn't.
you heard our comments yesterday.
We did. We're like caught between mom and dad here, though, because we're really at the end of our. We're almost ready for a C of O on the new space. I mean, we're literally weeks away from the new space. So
Well, I think you're very close. I think you just need to give us a little more detail on the existing space. Just show that you have fireproof self-closing doors on your
they're not
exits.
the doors are not self-closing, but they do exit outside.
Well, you don't show us that. All you do is show us two
Okay.
doors, and they exit into the ether.
They do exit outside. So I'll,
Exiting into the ether is not a good thing.
and there is no fire alarm.
Can there be fire
When are you anticipating getting a...
We're at Hub right now. We're just revising. We're going to be revising the plans that are in front of you because Hub wants to see some more information on them, which we're going to be doing, include the swimming pool and a couple of other things. And Mr. Caliendo, Jerry Caliendo, is handling that
And
application.
the fire department is okay with just exit signs?
This space that we're talking about here is being demolished.
I understand that.
being eliminated
But
in a matter of weeks.
In the meantime, he's like operating, so I'm just wondering.
Right, but yeah, no, we haven't been cited for anything, and we're
That
we're
wasn't my
okay.
question. Do you have exit signs that light up?
I will confirm that.
I would prefer to have some sort of alarm system in there.
Okay, there is no alarm system. If you'd like,
Get them to get a temporary alarm
We're-
in
we're-
there. Because
I don't mean
we
to-
don't know when you're getting your TCO. We just don't. It could be 2 months, 3
but we
months from
can't
now.
install a fire alarm system, spend tens of thousands of dollars installing an alarm system for a space that we're demolishing in weeks.
Well,
Weeks, and we're just trying
You
to.
don't know you're demolishing it in
We are. The space is built. It's up. We're close to the TCO. We can't install an alarm system.
Get the lights in.
We get lights, the
Get
doors,
lights
show you
in
where the
and make
doors
sure
go.
that you can exit from the space.
That would be
Can you do that?
fantastic. Yeah, so that we can do.
Okay.
That's the easy part.
I need you to do that, and I need you to give me some indication when you're getting that TCO and when demolition starts. Did you file for the demo?
I
Of
don't
the
know if
space?
Mr. Caliendo did, but we'll find out.
I think maybe you need to file for the demolition of the space.
Okay.
All right? That'll give me a lot of comfort that within a couple of weeks, that space will be gone.
Okay.
All right?
You've got it. That's easy.
Don't disappoint me, Mr. Palatnik.
Trying. Not everything's under my control. These days, less things than I ever thought are under my control.
All right. Are there any other comments on this? Is there any speakers on this item? So we can close this, and then how much time do you need for submission?
We'd like to submit the third week in December if we can. That'll give us time to fix up the plans, to meet Hub, and of course, we'll report back. to Commissioner Higgins.
Give us a time when you're going to get the demo done and when you anticipate that TCO. Hopefully, by the time you get back to us in December, you will
hoping.
have that TCO in hand.
I am hoping.
That would be nice.
Okay, so you can submit on the 16th of December
Yes.
for a hearing on the 6th of January, for a decision on the 6th of January.
Great. Thank you.
Motion to close?
Motion to close.
Chair Perlmutter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hinkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson? Oh, sorry, Commissioner Montanez?
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
Aye.
Is there an issue? Something? Oh, I don't know if this, okay. Item number 20, 3814BZ, 118 Oxford Street, Brooklyn.
116.
Oh, sorry, 116. That's what happens when you take your
That's
glasses
next
off.
door.
Hello, Eric Palatnik again. Thank you very much to the board for accommodating the owner's request to bring us back a week later. I've also brought with us today, because last week, you remember, the architect was not able to make it on such short notice. Mr. Sergei Tishayev is here now. He's the architect. He'd like to come up and communicate with the board a little bit, just to gain some more, after we're done with our dialogue, to gain more understanding about the pulling in of the height of the third floor of the building. I know you had concerns about the bulk envelope at the third floor. I know that yesterday at review session, Commissioner Hinkson, you had raised a question about the enlargement that's on the side of the home, the previously existing one that's been there since 1951, I think. We gave you the
I
Sanborn
think you
maps.
gave us a survey for 49.
49, yeah, I got the years off.
And, but there's nothing else that indicates that that bump is actually legal. And I suggested that you take a look at the BIS printout for this property, and there were several alterations done that looked like they were done after the CO in 1920, but they were done in 1920. There was also a building notice that was done like the 50s. So you might want to do a little research and find out whether or not for sure that bump is legal, because you already had an existing non-complying side yard. That would have made it even more, non-complying, regardless of when.
Right, but doesn't its its
put up.
existence-
But if it was put up illegally, whether it was done pre-61 is not really relevant, right? If you weren't supposed to build it in the first place. So we're going to need something that tells us that that structure was documented.
Sergey Tishev. Hi, how are you? My question in reference to you, because we are not enlarging that piece of the house, which is existing only on the first floor.
Right, but
we're
you're-
not extending it up.
Doesn't it go to the second floor?
No,
It
absolutely.
does. Yes, it
No.
does.
The drawings show that
The
you're
drawings
taking
No,
show that.
absolutely.
Yeah. You've got like a bathroom in there or something, if I remember
Yeah, there's a
correctly.
bathroom on the ground floor, and it makes the bedroom look better.
Yeah.
And it makes the
Show
bedroom a
the
little
second.
bit bigger.
It's not. Yeah.
Show us where we're reading that wrong then.
This is only first floor, and you can check it out on the second floor. A004.
Not on the plans we have, that's not the way it's shown.
You have it? Do you have it?
We're getting there. Just
We're
give us
getting
a
there.
second.
Hold on.
Time to load.
Yeah, it takes a little time for.
We have revised proposed plans submitted 11/5, and it shows the bedroom in the bump out.
Yeah,
On
it's
the
there.
second floor.
Yeah, I understand.
That's the bump.
Like a bump.
You're using it.
That's the third floor, but the second floor,
The second floor, you're going up an additional floor. So you're going to have to prove to our satisfaction that that's
Got to
a
be
legal
fixed.
condition.
We have new plans, which will be submitted, which is showing. Oh, I'm sorry. I have new updated plans, which is gonna be submitted on next submission. I can show it to you,
You
right?
can take the mic off.
Okay.
More comfortable.
These are the revised plans?
Yes.
So you're not going to extend that bedroom out?
no, not at
That
all.
second
Oh, so
floor?
you're taking away that.
It's
Only
It's
He
only
wants
one
to-
set.
he
though.
wants to-
only on the lower floor, which is an existing.
It's only one set. It's only one set. Just give
I
us.
still think you're going to have to show us that that's a legal bump. Because you're right on the
only one
property
set.
line. You already, like I said, have.
May I
a-
present you, this is the
pre-existing
survey
non-
of 1949.
We have that.
Oh, you have it?
But all
49?
that is a survey.
No.
I'm looking for something, because clearly on the Sanborns, that didn't exist, right?
But
Throughout
Sanborn
time.
is clearly showing
It
all the
didn't
houses in
And
this
they all-
block,
they
having all
look
those.
Pretty much the same.
And this is my assumption, it was built for the old houses before actually World War II, because of the new heating, because all of them having heating plants there in that extension.
Then what I would suggest is do a little
With the
research in the
separate
building
entrance.
department and look at all those building notices that were filed on this project.
And research the bump out and prove that it's legal.
Yeah.
Okay, in other words,
Because
looking
it
for,
sits right on the property line, and you already have a
so we're
non-compliant.
cutting it off, to the property line.
No, but you're retaining it at the first floor.
Yeah, you're retaining it at the first floor, and the question is that a legal construction in the first place?
Okay.
So if it was built illegally,
Yes, sure.
it's not like we can tell you, yes, keep it.
We'll take a look in the building department's record. Maybe
Yeah.
we can find some kind of building notices or
You've
something
got a
like
building notice out there and at least 4 or 5 alterations from 1920.
Yes.
It's going to
Okay.
go old school, so you're going to
We'll
be
check
looking
it
through
out.
paper. Old school. Okay. Go
other thing-
analog.
Yeah, may I ask you, this question is blank for me, in reference to that rear yard setback requested by you, 20 feet. but the section is asking for 8 feet only. Because we have, like,
Excuse me, Eric Palatnik. Madam Chair, he's been frustrated for the past week, and he's been discussing with me about the conversation we had last week about section 23-543. He's going backwards to that conversation that we had at the start of last week's hearing pertaining to the 8-foot setback from the yard lines for properties with multiple rear lot lines. And I've explained to him your position, and he's respectfully disagreeing with your position, or he's curious as to the explanation as to why 23-543 wouldn't apply, is what he's asking. That's what he's asking.
So I need to go to the section in the zoning resolution.
We have it here, the copy.
Not 20, so,
If
yeah,
you're
I know, I'm
coincident
just
with
needing
It's
to
right
find
here.
out.
side lot line of the adjacent.
Perhaps. 23-543. Yeah, but this isn't the part where, I had it on my own. Hold on a second, let me just see my own notes.
We apologize. We realize we're catching you off guard.
Yeah, we talked about this last week, right? Okay, so here it goes. The section cited is inapplicable because it applies to rear yards facing other rear yards where, listen, the rear yard extends from the rear lot line away from the street line, right? So here's the street. It has to be from the rear lot line away from the street line, right? The rear yard that you talk about extends from the rear lot line, which is here, towards the street line.
I understand now.
okay,
Now I
so-
understand. Sorry.
Okay.
No, I understand your point. I may disagree, but I understand your point.
No, but it's just what it says in the text, not in the.
Yeah, the diagram.
It's in 70, no, I don't know, whatever it is. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have the section here to cite to you, because you're not including all the diagrams. Yours is more like, yeah,
No,
yours
it's
is
all
this
of them.
one.
There. This is B and the rest.
Yours is A.
No,
because
look
you
at the B.
extend-
The last page.
Here's yours. Yours is A. In all districts, rear yards extending away from the street line is the example that's given in this one. That's your version of the flag lot. You actually have both things. You have, because the yard is zigging so much, you have double rear yards and you have
Understand,
flag
but if you look at that property, having rear yard line coinciding with the rear yards of the other property, and only on this, we are talking about the side
No, but it's not
yards.
about coinciding with the rear yards. It's where is your rear yard line, rear lot line? And which way does the rear yard have to grow? Either away from the street line or towards the street line. That's
Gotcha.
the issue.
Those new plans moved 20 feet
Yes,
according
I
to your
see.
request.
So in that case, just so Mr. Palatnik, is this the application then to show compliance with that rear, not going?
The proposal now is not going to be a 7369. It's going to remain a 7336. And what we're going to ask permission, 73622, excuse me, it's not a gym. And we're going to ask permission to maintain the first floor at its current dimensions as a grandfathered condition. And then we're going to set back at the upper floors in the roof towards the rear yard, not talking about the side yard.
Gotcha. But to grandfather your bump out, you're going to have to show us that.
For the side, we're going to go to DOB and look for our conversation separately for that portion.
And then you were going to
talk
address
about the height.
also here the,
You understand?
Mr. Palatnik is being spoken.
yeah.
I apologize.
You were also going to address here, the way you did on the other application on Norfolk, about whether the house is being lifted or whether the house is remaining and you're adding to it in terms of.
Discuss how you're
Yes.
raising the house.
We're adding to it.
You're adding to it. So
Yes, and just moving the floor,
You're retaining,
raising up the floor.
you're just raising the joists up
absolutely.
within the
Yes.
envelope.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so then that responds to that question.
You can pass this letter which is explaining.
That should be, Mr. Palatnik, that should be made clear in your statement of facts about how you are retaining the existing building, and then the drawings should explain how you're retaining existing structure, retaining the envelope, or at least a portion of the envelope, and raising the joists, okay?
We can do that.
Okay. And then we still needed, we still have an issue with the height of the building, right, that we wanted to talk about?
So how tall the building could be? Because the proposed building is within the envelope, much less than height according to the new regulations.
Right.
According to the flood
Yes,
flood elevation.
but so the issue here is actually, this is Oxford Street, right? So Oxford Street, unlike Norfolk, only a block away, is characterized by very small buildings. So even more so than Norfolk, the idea of effectively a four-story building is very out of character with the neighborhood. So we saw, as examples, not on Oxford, but on Norfolk, two examples of houses being lifted to comply with FEMA, and they're two-story houses that become three-story houses. So because your pitch is so extreme, it's making the house, and it's also that the attic, oh no, I can't even tell what's going on anymore. Because your pitch is so extreme, it makes the house look much taller than the neighbors.
Yes, I agree. So we have solution.
Okay.
Or cut it off, that pitch, to make it flat, just providing just decent slope on the top. Make it like, like this.
Okay, so you're gonna...
We actually use that solution to the front portion of that pitch, just cut off toward the rear. Yeah. So it's not gonna bring, much lesser height.
Well, and what if you just kind of splayed it out a little bit more?
No, then we're losing that floor area because if we cannot do it, so we're killing it completely the floor area on the slope.
Okay.
So I believe it's better off just cut off that pitch, that ridge.
Well, I think you just need to submit drawings because it's hard to tell. But we also need an axonometric so we can understand the roof line.
We have it.
Okay, and then also the streetscape, the proposal inserted into the streetscape so we can see how it responds to the neighborhood. Okay. And just,
There are one question about the south elevation, the third floor south elevation. The question was, no, this is actually south.
the main, sorry, that's the front elevation is the south?
No, side elevation.
Sorry.
So this is actually north.
Eric Palatnik, he's speaking now to the issue that you had at the last hearing about
about
the item at the third floor.
This is bulkhead for the stair.
Oh,
That's it.
okay. That's all.
We have stair underneath.
Okay.
We have two dormers and just bulkhead.
Okay. And then just in general, it's kind of things learning from the neighborhood. I mean, the neighborhood has a lot of sort of houses that represent the character of the neighborhood from the time when it was built, like in the 40s and things like that, right? And in terms of the vocabulary that you draw to do your roof line and so on, and your extension, if you could look around at those, there's some really great solutions in the neighborhood for dealing with that additional height when they added their second floors and things like that. If you could take a look at that, and that's a part of neighborhood character, because we did see some unfortunate examples, I have to say, that were approved by the BSA, where I don't know that the drawings were so clear that there would be these very odd formations that grew on the rooftops, and they really look strange. It doesn't look like architecture. It looks like, I don't know, like the builder did it. And so, and not to malign the builder, because some builders are really brilliant designers, right?
It's very hard now to find out the neighborhood character, because it's changing within last 10, 15 years. completely. Now it's almost 50% of the houses, which actually were just bungalows, one-story bungalows. I once mentioned it because it's next to the college where was the base, Navy base or something like that. So all those bungalows were built for the staff of the Navy base. So now it's changing. I think it's changing in a good way, not in a bad way. I hope.
We hope so too. But I mean, there really were some great alternative solutions. So if you could look around
Absolutely.
to see,
I
and
will.
try to draw, there were some actual houses that were wow houses, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So we'd like to see this be
You
a wow.
you're mentioning those two streets,
Um,
small streets. There's Norfolk
Right.
and Oxford,
They're
actually,
small.
because the rest is the much larger properties.
Right. No, but
40 by
examples of small houses that were just modified slightly to sort of bring them up to date, and they were done in a very respectful way, just to kind of learn from the
Okay,
neighborhood.
okay.
Okay.
Yes, yes. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Eric Palatnik. Thank you. You were very informative, and I think we needed to hear a little bit more information, so thank you.
Okay. Thank you, and I appreciate you figuring this rear yard condition out, and now we can move on.
Well, we're trying.
Okay, okay.
Different
so
one, that's for
we're
sure.
we never made a submission schedule because we didn't know how you were going to proceed from last week, right?
Okay. If we could-
So,
It'll probably take him a few weeks to get the plans together, so if we could submit maybe on the 16th?
of December, okay, for the hearing on the 6th?
Sure.
Is that good?
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I didn't ask, are there any speakers on this item? Any comments from anybody else? Sorry. Okay.
Item number 21, 4514 BZ, 337 99th Street, Brooklyn.
Hello, Eric Palatnik.
I believe you wanted to adjourn this? Is that
We
right?
did. We're going to give you photos taken from the roof to show the lack of an impact on the rear yard. And we're also going to be amending the BZ form to update that to reflect it as a legalization.
Right, okay. What else? Good, okay. So on this one, how much time do you need? Same submissions?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Okay. Submit on the 16th for a hearing on the 6th.
Great. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks.
Item number 22, 12214 BZ, 1318 East 28th Street, Brooklyn.
Good afternoon, Louis Garfinkel, applicant. I heard the executive session yesterday. So I understand the rendering that I gave, you'd like me to give the other side of the house. I'll take care of that.
And, you know, to understand the issue, it's a very odd kind of condition because you're making this addition only to one half of the house. It's kind of like really a designer's, major designer's challenge for how you add to one half of a structure. And, yeah, and not be so weird that it looks like a mistake.
So I think that what I submitted, from this time to, the new submission that I gave versus the last one, where the roof gradually inclines back in sync with the other house, was what I was thinking. The question is on the other side. I mean, you're going to have that little firewall coming up, and you're going to see something.
No, you're going to see something, but at the moment, we don't know what it is you're going to see.
Okay. No, okay.
Okay. And some of the, one of the questions was, why couldn't some of this be dealt with a dormer, which is a more traditional way of dealing with the increase in height from a side, so it wouldn't look so out of character.
I just think, I understand what you're saying, but again, what would happen to the front, when it inclines back, so I'm not gonna have, if I stick a dormer on, it may clash, that's all I was,
Well.
I'll try.
Sorry.
I could see the existing front roof with the shared window or the shared, I don't know what you call it, a party
Like-
dormer.
Yeah,
And then, like going back to a vertical wall with the dormer coming out. I know you have to raise the height.
yeah.
And I was just wondering, I think it would make the roof a little bit more practical instead of having a pitch towards a party wall.
Well, I have a second dormer, is that what you're referring to, like something like that, just a little larger? Like a wall?
Yeah, like the whole, maybe
Fill
half
it
of
in?
the home and just coming out at one single pitch. And then someday, if your adjacent neighbor, enlarges, it would be a matching roof line again. I'm just saying, is that not feasible?
Yeah, it is. I was just thinking that it might look too overpowering. You'd have the little dormer that's existing, and then this, so I thought that would be.
Well, would it be taller, or would it be the same height, or shorter than
Well,
the existing, what you're proposing?
I could make the dormer the same height as the main higher, the highest point, and wider. I can do that, yeah, just.
Well, I don't know,
It's hard to design in the air, because we're designing in the air, so this is really your task. But if you could take a look at that as an alternative also, and obviously the looking at the building from the other side, when you do the rendering, will give a lot of information too. At the moment, we don't have that, so you don't either, really, unless you have it in your head, which you may. So, okay. Then the other thing was, we wanted you to provide a study on the 20-foot rear yard and how that's going to impact neighbors, because, you're reducing the yard so much that it may be having an impact on neighbors to the left and right and rear. And so typical request these days is to stand in the rear yard and take a picture of the surroundings, and to stand on the roof of the existing house, take a picture around there so we can see what that impact will be.
Okay.
Okay. And then just in terms of the statement of facts, if you need to address the issues that are relevant to the special permit, so go through the findings and discuss neighborhood character in the findings. So part of the issue is that there was a land use study where we were just provided with a bunch of stuff. So the findings need to take us through the analysis. If you're making a case that this is an appropriate project,
Right.
then make the case, and don't have us make the case.
I understand, you want to tie it into the facts and findings?
Yes,
Which
right.
blocks were studied and,
Right, and also help us go there. If you give us materials, what are we supposed to do with them, This drawing shows, this photograph shows, the map shows, right?
Okay.
Imagine you're the reader, trying to figure out what in the world you're trying to say, okay?
okay.
And
I
then,
understand.
I think those were all the only comments. Anybody else have comments?
I just had a couple of comments. I see where you've got the party wall and you've extended that up so that you've got the firewall above the, whatever the requisite height is. But you've got, I'm looking at section 1, your cross-section. Why do you have that gully? Why didn't you just bring the attic over to your, to your party wall? Because you've created what I would consider probably an interesting water problem, that you're going to get water between.
This graphically didn't show that right, I don't know where.
You see what I'm saying?
I heard you, yeah, I heard it yesterday.
That is, a disaster waiting to happen. We've seen it
I
so many times before.
I think the party wall is beyond, and it just shows up,
It just shows up in.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah.
it's showing in section.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be in
Yeah,
section then.
I see in the rear elevation,
Right? In the rear
On
elevation,
A9
you're looking good, but in that cross-section 1, which I assume is from the front, you are, you've got that space, and it just seemed sort of strange that, it's a great water catcher, and
no,
a year
it's.
from now, you're going to be in trouble.
It's on 812, no, it's cut through the rear. So if you look in the rear elevation,
Yeah.
there is a party wall, but it's further over, but when they did the, when they did the section, it should have
Yeah, so.
It should have been left out. that's
Okay.
all.
And then my second question was, you guys share a flue with the.
Yeah.
So do you need to raise your chimney level to be above your peak? And do you have to do that to your neighbor as well?
We do. I'll indicate that if you want me to. I graphically showed it, but I didn't show it in
I
like
just
new
wanna make sure
construction,
that-
you know.
that- Yeah, that was understood, because that requires work on your neighbor's property.
Yep.
And it wasn't consistent on some of the drawings, so it's kind of this moving chimney.
Yeah.
I think I checked that, but okay, check again.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else comments? Any speakers on this item? Okay, so we could get a submission. Uh-oh. I lost the. I don't have
Did I
Sorry.
steal it from you? Wait a minute.
it. Well, I'll just do this by memory. Oh, here we go. Sorry. So if we could get a submission on the 16th of December
Sure, okay.
for a hearing on the 6th of January?
Okay.
Okay, thank
you.
you.
Item number 23, 14114BZ, 2465 Broadway, Manhattan.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Nackmes from Rothkrug Inspector, and I'm here to present for the Soul Cycle. Just to give you an update, we're still waiting for the BSA archive file on the premises, so we need more time to respond.
Okay, any idea how much time we need for this? A couple of months?
No, I don't think so. For the
January?
file?
Early January would be fine for us.
Okay, so how about a submission on January 6th
Okay,
for a hearing on the 27th?
sounds good.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
New cases on the zoning calendar, item number 1, 12514BZ, 11 Avenue C, Manhattan, Goldman and Harris.
Do we have all parts?
Should we do the PC?
Carrie here?
Where's my Carrie?
Okay.
Want to go do PC first?
Yeah, we can go to the PC. We can go to the 16614? Yeah, okay, we're
Okay.
gonna just go to the next one.
Right, item number 2, 16614BZ, 12 West 27th Street, Manhattan. Come on.
Good afternoon. Michael Nackmes, Rothkrug Inspector. This is for a Soul Cycle on the south side of West 27th Street between Broadway and 6th Avenue. We believe that the proposed PCE meets all of the findings of the special permit, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, I don't think we had any comments on this. Are there any speakers on this item? So we can close this?
Motion to close, Chair Perlmutter.
Aye?
Vice Chair Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown.
Aye. And I think we can grant, there's no reason to carry it on, so, and a motion to grant.
Oh, okay. Chair Perlmutter.
Aye.
Vice Chair Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown.
Aye. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Once again, item number 1, 12514BZ, 11 Avenue C, Manhattan.
Good afternoon. I'm Caroline Harris, Goldman Harris, representing the applicant in 11 Avenue C variance. We heard the comments of the commissioners at yesterday's executive session, and I wanted to address those comments. As you know, this is an application for a variance to seek a waiver of lot coverage and a use variance for the ground floor of a building located at 11 Avenue C, which is on the corner of Houston Street and Avenue C. The board had asked for a couple of items yesterday, including a neighborhood character study establishing that the proposed bulk is consistent with the neighborhood character. Our statement of facts and findings did provide information regarding the character of the neighborhood, specifically that the proposed FAR of this building is consistent with the maximum allowed in the area. We're not seeking an additional floor area, but the height of it is shorter than the maximum building height allowed under the zoning, which would have been 120 feet. The ground floor commercial proposed is consistent with the historic use of the property, which was use group 16 gas station pursuant to a BSA variance, as well as the uses all along Avenue C. Virtually all of Avenue C and the nearby area has a commercial overlay, and Houston Street west of Avenue B has a commercial overlay. So this ground floor commercial use is consistent both historically and with the zoning right adjacent to it. There are 4 residential developments located near the property that are comparable to or greater in height than the proposed development. This is also outlined in our statement of findings and fact. There's an 11-story affordable housing project directly across East Houston Street, a 7-story residence to the north on 2nd Street, an 11-story multifamily residential building to the northeast on the south side of East 2nd and 3rd, and 12-story multifamily residential building with ground floor retail under construction on the corner of East Houston and Avenue D. We'd be happy to prepare a map with those items identified and the commercial areas identified.
A map, and actually, if you could provide, say, an aerial photo that identifies those buildings and point them out and tell us the heights. That's really
Absolutely.
what's missing. And then in terms of the commercial base, that you tie it into a land use map, so we know where to look and where your argument is being made visually.
Excellent. We'll be happy to do that. The second issue raised was explaining why the $900,000 remediation cost is included in our financials. Isn't Exxon paying this? I agree this point needed a clarification. The DEC consent order that's referred to in our papers only required Exxon to clean the property to a commercial standard, even though the area is zoned for residential use and any new building would have to be, it's in the environmental condition of the soil would have to meet the residential standards. The commercial standard is much more lenient than the residential standard. So the costs that are identified in the financial report address the cleanup that will be done on this site in order to have a residential building, not simply to meet the DEC consent order, which is a much lighter and easier task.
What would be the cost to bring it to a commercial standard?
I don't know the cost. I'd have to speak to our consultant, but the only item that off the top of my head I know would be the same is has to do with removing the gas tank itself. Now, having said that, there's the second question. So there's how much, and then there's who's paying. Presumably, Exxon would have paid, but there's business negotiations taking place, and the amount that of work that Exxon is doing is uncertain, and how much they're going to be paying is uncertain. So for the purposes of this application, we needed to put in the full amount, even any incremental, any modest piece of that would have been just for the commercial cleanup, because it hasn't been ascertained who would be paying. So there's a possibility that the developer will be paying the entire amount, which would be required for the cleanup. And so it would 100% would properly be reflected in our financial analysis now.
Well, it would also be reflected in a lower purchase price for the site.
I'd have to defer to Jack Freeman, but I think the comparables were done on a market basis, so I'll let him address that. I mean, it could have been, but I don't think it has been.
Could you just give us even in narrative form what the differential is between the bringing it up to the commercial standards and the bringing it up to the residential standards? If you could just break apart that number. So
I'd be happy to give you a narrative along those lines to explain the difference, but again, we don't know right now, the developer may be paying all of it. So there is this site condition that is a premium cost for the project.
So none of the cleanup has been done, right?
My understanding, and again, I'd have to get some details, that little bits of cleanup have been done, but it's been an active gas station I think until very recently. And so only surface type of cleanup could be done in the meanwhile.
Okay, and the property's being purchased in an as-is condition?
Correct.
So, in other words, it won't be partly remediated and then turned over?
My understanding is that there was some discussion about it being partially remediated, but those discussions haven't been concluded. The extent of the remediation or who would be doing the work and who would be bearing the cost has not been fully fleshed out now.
Okay, so I think that's very relevant to the financial analysis. Obviously, if you're taking it remediated, it's a different cost than if you're taking it and you have to remediate it.
But in any event, the remediation is substantially different if you're remediating for the purpose of doing residential building, which my client would be doing 100% of, as opposed to Exxon. There's a delta.
Doing the delta, if it was remediated by the seller to the commercial level, then you would just be addressing the delta,
Right.
But if it weren't remediated and you're getting it, then it's a different thing, right?
I understand. So we'll do as much as we can by narrative, and to the extent that we can explain what those number differentials are, if there's any, since the deal isn't formulated, there is a risk that the developer is going to pay all, and we'll explain that in the papers.
Okay.
With regard to the soil conditions, I understand there was a question regarding whether the soil conditions at the site are unique to our property, and aren't there other properties in the area with the same conditions? So we actually looked very hard at this before we made our filing in order to find out, and maybe in response to the NOC as well, in order to find out, is this site unique, like truly the sole site with this, or certainly unusual site? And we looked, got information about two sites in particular that are close by. 133 Pitt, we actually found a cooperative architect who told us that 133 Pitt, which, let me just say further, we looked specifically at new construction. Obviously, buildings that have been there for 100 years, there's no way to tell. So we could only look to buildings that are new, relatively recently constructed. And so we inquired. Only one architect would actually tell us, that was at 133 Pitt, that there was no liquefaction problem at that location. We looked at the project that received a variance from this board on the same physical block. Surely if, it's pretty close, same block. And that project on Avenue B in Houston did not apply for a variance based on any soil conditions. And so I think it would be fair to presume that they didn't have a liquefaction problem. Otherwise, like us, they would have been here saying we have a liquefaction problem. So those were two where we could get information. I had some off-the-record conversation with that architect who said, no, they didn't have a problem on their site. There were other problems they had with the site after the variance was granted, but liquefaction wasn't one of the problems they had. There are a couple of other sites that are new projects, and we looked for data from the Department of Buildings, and it's not available on the Buildings Department website. It's not readily accessible information to find what was the soil condition when they did their excavation work. So we really have done what we can do to find out. Our geotech can't go onto other people's property and do borings. And if the owners aren't going to provide us with the information as a courtesy, I really am at odds with how to find it.
With those other new projects, though, are those actually at the Buildings Department now? They're in the permitting process?
No, they're complete with Cs of O.
Oh, they're complete. So that means the engineering drawings are on file, right? So you know who the engineer is.
Well, we contacted the engineers, and they wouldn't give us
They wouldn't
information.
give it without permission from the owner.
Generally, yeah.
Right. So the next step is to ask the owner. Usually owners are willing to cooperate with this, because it's not, you're not telling anybody anything special about the building, you just want the boring reports. So they just give permission to the engineers to share the boring reports, not the drawings, which are public record anyway.
Well, we'll certainly endeavor to do that. We obviously tried. We were successful on one of the other sites, and we were not successful with the other 4. So,
But you went to the architect directly as opposed to the owners, right?
I believe my staff tried to call the owners and the architects on both cases. I could check with them. If we reached out to the owners and were turned down, then I'll just have to report that to you, that we were turned down.
If all else fails, you might just simply want to go to the building department and pull the excavation documents. It might not tell us exactly how and, how much and the type of soil that we're dealing with, but you might be able to glean from how they constructed their foundations, what they used, the type of foundation, and their sort of foundation philosophy that might inform us as to what they were dealing with.
Okay, I appreciate that. We'd probably have to do a FOIL request. It's going to really push back when we can complete the...
Why do you have to do a FOIL request?
It's permitted. It's
Wouldn't we have to do a FOIL request to get those documents?
should just give
It's
it
called
to
an
you.
expediter.
Yeah.
All right,
The
well,
expediter, I'd like to
we'll look into it. But let me just move off this exact inquiry for a good reason. We have a liquefaction problem here. Our geotech expert is here, who's going to explain to you as an expert that the extent of the liquefaction issue here is far greater. Liquefaction happens often in the city, but this particular site has a particularly bad and deep liquefaction problem, which is very unusual across, in any neighborhood, no matter what neighborhood you're in. So I think we might be able to argue that this site is unique just because of the significance and seriousness of that liquefaction problem, and maybe avert having to do this additional work on other sites. I say this particularly because the interaction between the liquefaction problem and our structural issues is very significant. I will again defer to our geotech expert to explain that, but were this a typical site, which is the site we've used as one of the alternatives here, this liquefaction might not be a significant issue structurally, but on the small trapezoidal size of this site, it becomes a very significant problem. So I'd like you to listen to what he said, and then let's revisit whether we really need to do all of this additional work in order to substantiate that we have a very unusual circumstance on this site with regard to the liquefaction.
Okay, I think what you're getting at, though, is that because of the size of the site, because of the triangular shape, which doesn't allow for you to spread the weight of the building over a larger area, you're dealing more with the kinds of pressures imposed on the soil. So I think what you're starting to say is, even if we didn't have the soil as a unique condition, we have the size of the site as a unique condition, and the size of the site brings up these complexities. So maybe what you should be doing instead, if you can't substantiate the uniqueness of the liquefaction, that you instead talk about the uniqueness of the unusual site shape and all of the things that it's forcing you to do. That on a typical site, you wouldn't have the same kind of foundation problems because you could spread out the loads more. Something to that effect.
Fair enough. We would certainly express that concept, which is in our papers, but we would do it in a different way. We could eliminate the liquefaction as a subsurface condition. I think you might well be convinced by our expert, who I was persuaded. Of course, I don't know very much, and I might be easily persuaded, but I think he will explain the way in which this site, the depth of the liquefaction problem here is very unusual, even if there's liquefaction problems at other sites. Finally, I will have Jack Freeman come up to discuss the issues of site values and comparables with regard to the inclusionary bonus and the 3 other questions that you raised. And then I'll come back and we can answer any other questions you might have and deal with our schedule. So let's have Nejim.
You state your name for the record.
Nejim Jundi. I'm with JZN Engineering and the geotechnical consultant for the project. Excuse the way I'm dressed, I was at construction site before I came here. I wanted to talk about the soil conditions in this site, but it's specifically how everything ties together. Typically, when you have in Manhattan, when you have a liquefaction issue, it's typically the upper soil conditions that is liquefiable, because everything below has so much load over the years that got compacted to a state where liquefaction doesn't become a problem. So the way we deal with it is, everybody's building basements, parking garages below ground, we're removing that soil anyway, it's done. The other part, the way we deal with it is as was discussed before, is that the structural engineers will put grade beams between the foundations, X-braces, tie all the foundation together so that if there's a soil loss when it liquefies, the lateral resistance of the piles or the foundation is not lost. The building will stay together, it will crack, but it won't collapse. In this case, because of the liquefaction being, the soil that is liquefiable is so deep, putting a basement below ground is not going to solve the problem. And as you know, the lot is almost like a triangle. I mean, there's a point to it. So in that area, it's hard just to use a normal pile, a normal size pile, and just hold the building together. You gotta actually beef up that part, so that, because there's no lateral bracing between not much lateral bracing between the foundation. So it's like a double whammy. You have a problem with the side shape, and then you have also the deeper liquefaction. So in my opinion, that's what makes this site a little bit unique. That's what I can testify.
So the first whammy, as you say, is the depth of this unstable soil, right? And which is unusually deep, but that's part of what we're trying to say is how unusual. Are there any other sites in the area that have equivalently deep, or is there some kind of a database where you kind of, one of those geotech databases where you can know what strata is?
Unfortunately, I mean, if we were in San Francisco or Los Angeles, we would have it. Actually, USGS would have it because it's a huge earthquake. Liquefaction only becomes a problem in the event of an earthquake. However, because of the fault we have that's been sleeping for hundreds of years, the building codes are requiring that we take that into account and we design for it, even though it didn't happen yet. Everybody's saying it's going to happen. When it's happened, everything's coming down. So that's why the building code was changed to account for all that. Actually, the philosophy of the building code entirely changed to account for all these. Before they were looking at all the sites are assigned the same earthquake parameters. Now, no, it depends on the soil conditions and the use of the building and what you're using. That's how you reinforce the building. So, is there sites exactly like it in all of Manhattan? Yes, of course.
Just within the area. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, are there sites exactly the same? I mean, most likely the building next door, which we probably have to underpin, has the same conditions. But if you're asking me 7 blocks away, I mean, there's not a lot of development going on, so it's kind of hard to get all that information.
But do you have access to other colleagues, engineering colleagues, who you might be able to call who worked on some of those other sites that, even a phone call?
Yes, we do. But in my line of business, I'm being honest here, knowing what the soil is gold. Because that's how you win the job. So
But
if,
these are
even if I
buildings
call,
that- these
if
are
I call my
buildings built.
colleague in company A and B,
Yeah.
they're not gonna tell me because that's actually what we do. We map all the soil we have on all over the area to, when we bid on jobs, we know what we're doing before we actually do it.
So you didn't work on those other sites, so you're not friends, you didn't hire the guy from that engineering company to come work for you? Okay.
Let me just rephrase the question I brought up yesterday.
Yes.
The reason why I brought it up is, I understand that you have relatively loose soils. I understand the liquefaction problem, but it's just that geologically speaking, these situations are not limited to, a 6,000 square foot.
No, I'm not
It's
saying that.
usually in terms of there was a lake, or there was some sort of, special deposit that was laid down, and it affects an area, geologically speaking.
Okay,
So that's why I'm saying it's unusual to emphatically say it's only the site.
no, I never said it's only the site. Is the immediate area, I just said, the neighboring building on the same block will have the same exact problems. But what makes this site especially unique is the two conditions of the shape and the liquefaction. If there's no liquefaction issue, I will not be standing here because the shape doesn't matter.
Well, the liquefaction comes from the soils, and it's back to a
Correct.
geologic reason.
And if I was doing the building next door, which will have a liquefaction issue, I will not be standing here because all I need to do is brace the columns with beams, grade beams, and I'll call it a day.
But here, you can't brace the columns with grade beams because
Well,
of the
it's,
shape.
yeah, I mean,
The grade beams don't go
I
anywhere.
won't have 3 columns in a row at one point of the building.
You're only on the western
Yeah.
side?
Most likely, that's what's, yes.
So the eastern, smaller,
It will make the foundation more expensive because it's a
and the
different.
north and south, it doesn't work?
I don't have my direction. Which way is, 2nd Street, which is the
Well, it
smaller
would be
side?
on Houston,
Avenue C, okay. So on Avenue C, I'm sorry, I'm very bad with that, along Avenue C, that portion, and until you get probably middle of the building, it will be difficult to brace because of that condition. It will, not difficult, we will add more costs to the construction, basically.
and you can't brace along East Houston or Second?
No, you can.
You
but
can.
You brace this way, and then you have to brace this way.
So there is one wall that you can't properly brace.
No, it will be braced, but the cost of bracing will be substantial beyond another building that, under normal, same soil condition, will be less.
So that's the issue, that you can provide the grade, you can brace the columns with grade beams, but it's just that because of the shape of the site, it's a much more costly system to do
Correct.
that. So I know
It's a
that,
combination of things together. As I said, if you're next door, it's a rectangular shape, you can easily brace it. But triangular shape makes it more complicated.
okay. So I think that that's what we need clarification on. So if you could work with Ms. Harris and create a narrative and maybe a diagram that shows us what the difference is in the
Okay.
bracing on a typical site, on that rectangular site, versus on this site, and what the delta is between kind of standard bracing.
When you mean delta, meaning
The
cost?
the difference in cost, yeah. I mean, I know you probably don't do the cost aspect
No.
of it, but then that can be provided to the cost estimator to just understand
Okay.
what you would do on a typical site versus what kind of bracing you would do on this.
Okay.
Okay? Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
We'll review our papers. We think that we did that analysis, and if it's not been crystal clear, we will highlight it or rephrase it so that it is crystal clear.
I think just to kind of focus more on, even if, even a paragraph that goes something like, even if liquefaction or liquefaction, how you pronounce it, is actually not a particular issue or is not the specific unique condition here, the costs are significant because is that substandard soil condition that needs to be addressed in a different way than on a typical site, and this is how, and these are the costs.
Would that eliminate the need to go on this hunt for comparables if we just
I think
reshape
that's what
it?
you're doing. Then you're sort of saying that the soil condition is not your unique condition. It's just that it's the soil condition, and in order to address the soil condition, you have to do this kind of heroic with the bracing.
Okay.
Unless there's a lot more to the structure because it's particularly deep soil condition, liquefaction condition, and that adds something else that we haven't really discussed, right?
But
So
even if
that-
it were the depth had to add cost to the structure,
It would
we
be
just have to
tied
show
back
that the-
into the shape of the building,
Right.
right? So that's,
okay, we'll look at it to see if we can avoid the prolonged investigation of other sites, and if we need to pursue that, we will continue to do that as well. Thank you. Now, the last set of issues that were raised had to do with comparables for site value calculation and the calculation of inclusionary housing development rights, the price of vacant land, and the retail rents. I will defer to Jack Freeman on that particular topic.
okay, thanks.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Jack Freeman here on behalf of the applicant. Reviewed the questions that were asked. We have the instant replay, which is great because then we can actually hear questions again and again. I think there were really only 3 areas that were raised. The first was the valuing of the inclusionary housing credits. And I'll just preface my comment on that. I understand exactly what Commissioner Otley Brown was asking for in terms of determining the ratio. Inclusionary housing sales are not recorded. They're all private negotiations. There is no database that you can go to, like ACRIS, to see what people are actually buying these for. And in fact, HPD just keeps track of the number of rights that are sold, but not what they were sold for. So myself and other people who are asking the same question, what should I advise a client on in terms of rights? I think we've done it the correct way, which is to take a look at the relationship between development rights sales, which also have a similarly limited market, and land sales. And as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner, basically you'd like us to align the land sales and the development rights sales in time so that we get a ratio that you feel is more valid rather than have some. There were 4 we showed. 2 of them were within a few months apart, but 2 of them were
Over a year apart.
over a year apart, so we'll do that.
Right, just need to trend up those.
Or
land
we'll find
sales or-
some more time-relevant ones, and that, there's not a problem in doing that. So that takes care of the value of the inclusionary rights. The second question you had related to taking another look at the retail rent comparables that we used, we'll do that. We understand your question, and I think we'll take a look at how we did it, and if we feel that there are additional adjustments or other comps to add, we will do that. The last thing had to do with cap rates, which on this I have to respectfully disagree with what the Commissioner said. We provide our cap rates based on what we get from realty rates. Realty rates provides 3 tiers of capitalization rate. They provide a low capitalization rate. This is a rate that one would use on properties with the least amount of risk. And very few properties meet that qualification, but they include them. They provide the high rates, and just for example, the high survey rates for retail are 10% higher than the low surveyed rates for retail, the difference between 14.68 and 14.71. So there's a 10% range. And then they provide an average, and even the average of survey rates was at around 10%. So I think in selecting the retail rate, we used an overall 5.5% rate, which I think was aggressive for retail, given that this is not a high-end retail location. It's not a prime street, whereas for residents on the Lower East Side is highly valued and not at significant risk. So I think in selecting a 5.5% rate for both the retail and the residents, that in effect was our judgment as to bringing the rate down for retail to something that was a little aggressive, but also reflecting the value of the residential property. So we didn't break out the two rates, but we felt 5.5% was, and we still do feel that that's appropriate.
Right, but if you look at the overall range, the range for retail is lower than the range for residential.
This is
Now,
at the
wait,
lowest
right.
end.
But if you're looking at both ranges on the two realty rates forms that you gave us, the range for retail is lower. It's got a lower starting point, lower ending point than it is for residential. So if you're going to use a low end for a totally residential property, then the logic should follow that if you have retail, you should go to a slightly lower cap rate.
Well, that's where we disagree, so we'll be
Right,
glad to
but
think about it some
I also
more.
wanted to bring up the point, realty rates, I don't believe is providing you a chart that's solely for Manhattan.
No, it's not.
Correct? So therefore, one could even argue the point that retail and residential in Manhattan, even if it isn't in the prime spot, is still the most secure, low-risk investment that you could have that realty rates is actually addressing.
I would agree with that, which is why we picked a residential rate, but you still have to take into account the relative risk for the retail locations. And there was an article in the Times today about Saks Fifth Avenue selling, just the land value appraisal was $4 billion. That's a very low-risk area, and that might be at the low end of what the cap rates would be. If you move to a different neighborhood, you're going to have to reflect the conditions in that neighborhood. And I think that we used good judgment here, but I'll be glad to take another look at it. And there are some other sources there, and we'll see what they're saying.
Yeah, look at the other sources, see what they're saying, and at least provide more of a rationale for why you didn't vary it, because you do have a substantial amount of retail here, and it should be reflected. You should be doing some sort of a blend.
I'll take a look at it, but again, I think that we...
So even if you end up at the same 5.5, you still should show the background, the logic that went into the decision that I would blend this.
Okay.
However, I would not choose the lowest retail cap rate available.
I'll speak to that.
because-
I understand your question, but I'm just saying that from our methodology, 5.5% is pretty aggressive overall cap rate, and we'll just provide a better rationale.
Great, thank you. Any other?
Yes, the DEP sent a letter stating that you should coordinate with OER. Are you going to proceed with that, and are they going to be helping you on this remediation effort at all?
I'll answer that question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I'll check with the environmental consultants regarding the process that they're following. If DEC said they should DEP said they should coordinate with OER, I assume they are. But I'll verify that they're doing that.
Okay.
Is there already an approved?
There's a RAP.
There's a RAP approved, okay. All right, are there any speakers on this item? Yes.
Jasmine Torres for Councilmember Rosie Mendez.
Speak up, please.
Sorry, Jasmine Torres for Councilmember Rosie Mendez. Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to voice my opposition regarding case number 125-14-BZ, the variance request being sought for the property located at 11 Avenue C. My name is Rosie Mendez, and I am the councilwoman representing District 2 in Manhattan, where the subject property is located. The subject property located within Manhattan Community Board 3 is an R8A zoning district and a designated inclusionary housing area, was operating as a mobile gasoline station up until early September of this year. 350 East Houston LLC, the applicant, is now seeking waivers from the Board of Standards and Appeals under the zoning resolution of the use restriction and lot coverage regulation, sections 2210 and 23145 respectively. The proposed development of the subject property is a 10-story mixed-use residential building. The applicant is seeking these variances because of the unique shape and conditions of the property, a small and narrow, irregularly shaped lot, which creates a hardship that allegedly prevents the applicant from realizing a reasonable return. The shape conditions of the subject property, however, were known to the applicant at the time the property was purchased. Under Section 2210 of the zoning resolution, an R8A zoning district only permits use groups 1 through 4 as of right, which includes community facility use. Here, the applicant is seeking a waiver to permit commercial use, use group 6, on the ground level of the subject premises. Though the applicant is seeking to use the ground level as retail space in requesting a variance, I and the community board are strongly opposed to any use other than what is permitted as of right. Since I was elected into office in 2006, I have seen many changes within my council district, including loss of community facility space. In order to preserve the character of my district as development of the area continues, it is vital that we retain the wide range of permitted options within the meaning of community facility use to ensure that neighborhood residents located near the institutions can benefit from their services. Therefore, I respectfully request this board denies the applicant's variance request to permit commercial use on the ground level of the subject premises. The applicant is also seeking a variance under Section 23-145 of the zoning resolution because the applicant's proposed development exceeds the maximum lot coverage totaling 42,293 square feet built full on the property. Under the zoning resolution, the as-of-right lot coverage for the subject premises is 80% for corner lots and 70% for through lots. Here, the maximum floor area ratio of the subject premises is 5.4. This FAR, however, can be increased to an FAR of 7.2 under the inclusionary housing program, though either affordable housing on the site or through purchasing development rights. Under the applicant's proposed plan, the increase is based on the purchase of development rights. This board should deny the applicant's request for a variance under 23-145 of the zoning resolution because, I'm almost done, because the applicant will not be putting affordable units on site. When Community Board 3 and I worked diligently on a contextual rezoning that was realized in November of 2008, our intention was only to get additional FAR to developers who would provide permanently affordable housing on site. Equally important, off-shaped lots that once served as gas stations and diners are being converted to residential housing, even though the site is not suitable because developers are hedging their bets on a zoning variance and a real estate market that provides large profits for any construction in this area, no matter how unsuitable the site or their housing may be. Lastly, I reside several blocks away, and as such, I have personally witnessed and suffered the effects of several gasoline station closures in my district and its conversion to luxury housing. My community, post-rezoning, continues to lose much-needed services, i.e. gasoline stations, and we do not receive any affordable housing units through voluntary inclusionary zoning. But then, we are also being asked to forego precious community facility space that is our right under zoning. Though the mobile gasoline station that once occupied the subject premises has closed permanently, I respectfully request that this board not grant variances to an applicant who was well aware of the conditions of the property that was purchased. Once again, thank you. If I may, I also would like to drop off testimony from a community group that was unable to stay.
Yes, thank you. Next speaker. Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Susan Stetzer, and I'm here for Community Board 3, and Community Board 3 has voted to oppose this application. The board feels this application does not represent the minimum request necessary to make the project financially feasible, and it does not meet the 5 findings necessary for the BSA to approve the variance. It undermines the fundamental goals of the 2008 East Village rezoning to preserve the character of the neighborhood and provide opportunities for affordable housing, a priority of the de Blasio administration. CB3 strongly opposes the variance for use group 6. The applicant's argument of contextual consistency with the surrounding area belies the fact the area is struggling to retain local businesses. In recent years, CB3 has watched its local mom-and-pop shops rapidly replaced by chain stores, banks, and destination bars. The Center for Urban Future's State of the Chains 2013 identified East Village of having the second highest number of national chain stores in all of Manhattan. Stores that once served retail needs of local residents have been priced out by rent and property tax and utility increases. Secondly, the application does not even consider as of right use groups 3 and 4 community facilities. We have lost many community spaces in the last 10 years, which are listed in my written testimony. And community facilities can also generate higher rents, such as medical offices, that would provide the income the developer is seeking. The developer states a prior use of the property was commercial, and therefore this should be allowed. But this is not valid because the important community need was served by the gas station. This is now the last gas station in the neighborhood that we've lost. People of the community must travel out of area to find a gas station, and therefore no connection can be made between the previous use that served a community need and use group 6 retail, which is already more than prevalent throughout the community. We contest the developer's unwillingness to guarantee the required affordable housing on site. The rezoning intended for the Houston Corridors redevelopment to benefit the district, which has seen affordable housing units dwindle and rents skyrocket due to gentrification. Median rent for all renters in the community increased by 19% between 2006 and 2012. The community is increasingly stratified by a growing income gap. CB3 now has the 6th highest income diversity ratio in the city. The reason for the inclusionary housing bonus in the 2008 rezoning was specifically to attract affordable housing within CB3. However, this developer will not commit to building housing within our district. And lastly, we believe the constraint of irregular shaped units is not a substantive reason for waiver of lot coverage. We agree with Councilmember Mendez. This is sadly another example of an application of a developer developer counting on a zoning variance and frenzied residential demand in the area, no matter how unsuitable the site may be. The physical condition was well known to the applicant before the property, and there are other means to obtain funds to abate toxic materials. There are also other means to obtain revenues, such as community facilities. Because all conditions were known before the acquisition, we believe any hardship is self-imposed. Thank you.
As the board knows, purchasing property, knowing that you anticipate filing for variance applications is not a bar to the application itself. It's ironic that I think ExxonMobil would be really thrilled to know that it's being considered tantamount to a community facility use. It's certainly not locally owned, and it's not operated particularly for the community's benefit in the way that a community facility is. They're not there. It was a tenant of the property. We can't restrict uses. And in fact, that use itself was subject to a variant, an approval by the BSA. So the arguments desiring the retention of a gas station, it's just not, it's not relevant to this application. And the mayor is also promoting green and mass transit and walking and exercising, so dependence on cars should probably be shifted towards bicycles or other means of transportation. In terms of the inclusionary housing benefit, the law is very clear. It allows for, as you well know, either the provision of the bonus by providing housing on site or by paying for certificates for units that are developed off-site. The developer here will only get to the 7.2 FAR if he does one of the two, either purchases the certificates that have helped create off-site affordable housing or by putting it on the premises itself. So they're not going to get to the 7.2 FAR without that. It will not be it will not be a market rate project unless it provides for assistance to develop affordable housing through the inclusionary housing bonus program as it's set up in the statute. There are some other inconsistencies in the comments made both by the councilwoman and by the woman who just spoke regarding the suitability of the site. If it's not suitable for residential, then you need a variance. I mean, it kind of conflicted internally inconsistent testimony. That having been said, I certainly respect their concerns for what they consider the character of the needs of their community and the difficulty for the community to get affordable housing units. It's a bigger problem than this particular project can address. We would like to, if there are any other questions, happy to answer them.
Well, did you review having having community facility on the ground floor? I don't think you gave us that.
No, we didn't give you that. There was enough difficulty in meeting the reasonable return with market rate residential. Community facility use is clearly rent for less than either the market rate residential or the commercial. And so it seems like an unnecessary exercise.
So just to remind, the ground floor was shown as residential with a lobby, basically, right? On the as of right, right?
Residential lobby.
Residential lobby on the and residential
Yes.
on the ground floor, right? Okay. So that was actually something that provides arguably a better rent roll than the community facility on the ground floor. Right?
Correct, it would.
Correct. Okay, any other comments? Okay, so if you could submit your response. So in terms of the response, should we go through maybe the list of what needs to be submitted? And again, anything I left out, please feel free to fill it in. So in terms of the neighborhood character study, you're going to provide an aerial photograph showing the heights of the surrounding buildings to give you an idea of how this fits into the site. And in your statement of facts, tie those together, that analysis together also with the land use map to support the commercial uses in the neighborhood. With respect to the remediation costs, you're going to dig deeper into who's paying and what the kind of chain of ownership is, whether that will be paid, whether the initial remediation will be paid by Exxon or whether it be prior to sale, or whether it's the owner's responsibility after sale, and also to discuss the difference between what kind of remediation is needed for residential as opposed to commercial use.
I just want to clarify, there already has been the transaction, the applicant is the owner, but there are these details about Exxon because it was a tenant. I just don't want to mislead you.
Okay.
Exxon
was a tenant.
Yes.
But not of this current owner.
Correct.
Okay. So, okay.
Am I correct that tenant was the lease was still in effect when they bought the property? So the Exxon did not own the property.
Okay.
A private owner owned the property, leased it to Exxon. It was
Yeah, maybe you should come up and clarify.
Identify
because-
yourself.
Yeah.
State your name for the record and clarify it, or have Ms. go.
And state your name, please.
Kevin Tartaglione. I work for BLDG, who's the owner of the property. We bought this property. It's been closed on for, I think we bought it over a year plus ago. Mobile Exxon owned the property, but as they do with most of their facilities, they franchise them out and have a lease with the franchise, an operator. So the operator has a lease with us. We've stepped into place for Mobile, because Mobile owned the site. So now we have a lease with the franchisee, and their responsibility is to clean up the site to its commercial standard.
Okay, so the tenant's responsibility is to clean up the site to a commercial level. Okay, okay, thank you. Okay, so that makes even more relevant. So the tenant's responsibility is to clean the site, and your responsibility is to pick up the delta between, and we don't know what the delta is between commercial.
Correct. I don't mean to contradict my client, but his general counsel said that they're still dealing with the tenant about the cleanup and its costs, so.
Okay, all right, so whatever the situation is.
We'll
you will
explain it.
clarify. Okay, okay, then, let's see. We also talked about, sorry, I need to find my notes. We talked about the subject of the liquefaction and how you're going to modify the narrative to explain perhaps less that liquefaction is a unique condition, but that it is in fact a soil condition that's there on the site that needs to be dealt with and is more difficult to deal with because it's a triangular site. And you work with the engineer to come up with a narrative that will also describe what the grade beams and bracing situation would be on a standard site, on a typical site, versus what's needed to be done in this case. Okay, and then in terms of Jack is going to, Mr. Freeman is going to be aligning the land sales and the development right sales in time. And we'll look at new comps for the retail and to explain better why the cap rates are being blended the way they are to justify the choice of the cap rates. Is that more or less a summary? And we'll look at other sources for cap rates, providing a better rationale for why the rate isn't blended. And then I think that might have been it. Is there anything else I missed?
Then all the C finding stuff, the height, I think you wanted to.
Yeah, that, I mentioned that at the beginning. Okay. Anything else? Site man, okay, all right. So, can you do that by a submission on the on the 16th?
Yes.
Is that soon enough?
Yes.
I mean, too late? For a hearing on the 6th. I think.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you so
Great.
much, and I wish everybody.
Oh, I'm sorry. If there's opposition, I don't know if is there actually opposition? So we could, I don't know if there is actually opposition.
They were
Council
just
member.
the two comments.
Yeah, it's just the comments. I
Council
didn't get
member
the
and
sense
the-
it's opposition. It's more like, so we could give it a little bit, the hearing, well, the submission is on the 16th. They have plenty of time to submit, say, on the 30th for a hearing on the 6th. How about that?
And who would that opposition be that I should send?
To the elected officials.
To the electeds, really, community board and.
Not
the
anybody
council
in
member.
other person.
Not that we know of.
Okay,
Do you have
good.
someone in mind?
Yeah, no, nobody in mind. December 16th, we'll submit, and we'll have a hearing on January 6th. Thank you so much, and a very happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
You too. Thank you.
This concludes the November 25th public hearing for the Board of Standards and Appeals.
Turn off your mics, please.